just before we start, I just want to make sure that this is an open session. So if you guys have any questions during the middle of the session, please feel free to put your questions in the Q&A box. We'll have people answering your questions. Also, if you have some concerns, any support issues, you can put it in the chat box as well. And I'll be happy to take any questions. We do have a separate Q&A session at the end, but if there are questions that pop up, I'll be happy to take them in the middle of the session as well. So before we start, I'll just quickly give an introduction about what we do. So we at Digital Ed India, we deal with an edtech product that is specifically designed for STEM-based courses and looks at deploying and managing STEM-based content. What we will be covering today will be active learning strategies for STEM-based courses. What we'll be focusing on is how you can actually uplift the current educational ecosystem that you have for your own course and try to incorporate a bit more blended learning approach. And again, if there is anything that isn't clear to you, if you have any more questions, whether it is later during the session or even when I'm talking about active learning, feel free to put your questions in the chat. So let's get started. So we'll start off with what is active learning. So active learning is simply anything that involves students in actually doing things and also thinking about things that they are doing. So let's take a sample lecture, for example. Most of the learning takes place where instructor comes inside a class, teaches their students, goes back. So here, students are definitely involved in listening, but are they really thinking about what's actually happening? So that is where active learning comes into play. And majorly as you move on to higher level of classes, because the concepts start getting tougher, instructors have less time to complete their courses, this active learning approach sort of gradually breaks down. We see a lot of this when students are in preschool, in first grade, second grade, and their early development. There's a lot of active learning involved. But when they get back up to the higher levels of education, we see a lot of this is lost, primarily because instructors or even institutes don't really have the time to do all of this. Now, and again, just comparing it with a lecture. So ideally, active learning would mean students are doing more than just listening to a lecture. So the goal is to get them to either discover what they're actually studying, process it properly so they actually understand it, and then also try to get them to apply the same information that they're actually learning to see if their understanding levels are actually matching with the learning objective of the lecture that you completed. So that is what active learning is all about. And sure, this may seem like a very big thing, and you have very restricted time in your current classes. You have a 50-minute lecture where you need to cover all of this. Already you're pressed for time for completing the curriculum for a semester. We'll cover all of that during the later course of the session. But right now, I just wanted to introduce what active learning is about. We're primarily focusing on engaging students a bit more and improving the students' learning experience. Now, as I mentioned, we did talk about what active learning is, but is it really needed at this point? So there was this study done a while ago. This was infographic that you see here was published in an IEEE journal about a decade ago that made a specific point about ineffectiveness of lectures. So what researchers did is they measured brain activity for various or a group of students across daily activities that they did. It doesn't necessarily need to be study, everything that they did during the day. So that included watching TV, doing chores, even meeting other friends, attending classes, sleeping, everything. What was very, very surprising is on average during a week, attending a lecture showed the second least brain activity or brain stimulation. And the least was just sleep. So again, this is not our own research. This is a published research. If you need the link for it, we can definitely be shared with you. But that is where active learning comes into play. So the primarily how learning is taking place today is focusing on you delivering a lecture to a student. And then a student goes back home and he studies, he doesn't study, how much does he understand? That is lacking. And that is where we're trying to see how we can incorporate that into the existing course curriculum. But the need for it is the same. Students are stimulated when they're actually learning during the lecture. And you'll see the brain activity that's being mapped. You will even notice that people were more stimulated while watching television in most cases, even more stimulated while doing basic chores than just sleeping. And you'll see, which is very logical as well, when students are in lab classes, because they're actually applying things that they're learning, their effectiveness of the brain activity is much more. So we're trying to see how we can actually incorporate that into a class environment or a standard learning environment as well. Like, can we actually bring them in the same thing inside a classroom? Another thing that I'll show you is something called the forgetting curve. Again, this also will primarily gotten down to why active learning is important. What researchers have found out is 50% of what students are actually taught after the lecture is complete, they forget within an hour or so. And within 2 days, they forget 70% of what they've studied. And this is something that you would notice as well. Like, you would see classes very attentive, they're paying attention, and the lecture went very well. The day after you come to the class, ask somebody a question and suddenly they don't remember it, or they definitely don't remember it as much as you would like them to. So these are the sort of challenges where instructors don't really have an idea or a very good idea of how to actually fix this. And the onus always falls on the student you should go home and you should look at your notes and you should revise or you should practice, because they've already been provided with quality education by the instructor inside the class, which is true. But then if the onus completely falls on the student, what happens is you have very different learning paths for students. So some students will do very well, some students who are not really interested will lose interest, and they, even if they are able to understand the concept, but they will lose interest and then they would end up scoring less or not understand the concept. Now, what will be very important, and a lot of a question might occur with you as well, like, why are we conducting this webinar at this point, right? Active learning, I showed you the infographic as well. This has been around for about a decade or even more. Like, this sort of thing hasn't changed. Like, this is how we teach. This hasn't changed for 20 years. So why now? STEM becomes very, very problematic. Like, this active learning or lack of student engagement that active learning can fix is even more problematic for STEM. And specifically the focus that we have on STEM education, this is why we wanted to cover it right now. Primarily when a student is engaged in a STEM course, whether it's graduation in mathematics, physics, engineering, whatever courses, or even if you look at if it's there in a non-STEM discipline, but the course that they're taking currently is STEM, even that could be the case. Now, the problem is they're actually studying multiple complicated subjects daily. So there are multiple subjects that they have to study, and they're restricted to, again, about learning inside the classroom where a teacher comes, teaches, and that is where majority of the learning is taking place from students' perspective. And as teachers, you only have about 50 hours a semester for a course, and that you are actually spending, like, bifurcating with about 50 students. So that doesn't really translate, or you're not able to provide as much support as you would want to in some cases. And because STEM courses are a lot more complicated, they need more application and practice so that the course becomes more successful. But as I mentioned earlier, you only have 50 hours about that to complete your course. Now, if you want to inculcate application and practice, you would need to take time outside the classroom to do so. And already, like, a lot of the time we talk to instructors, one of the most common query that comes up is we're not really able to complete a course itself. And at the time they have to take extra lectures or they have to rush to certain subjects. So that already is a problem. So where do we actually find the time to do something that's additional to what the instructors are actually doing? And if you want to incorporate practice, definitely not enough time to deploy assignments, right? If you wanted to conduct assignments, you need to create, then you need to conduct them inside the class, then you need to go back home and grade them, and then you need to come to the class, share assignments, and maybe discuss their setup tutorials. Again, restricted time, it's just not possible. Another pain point that comes up, this is primarily from the student side, or sometimes this also affects teachers, is right now we've seen an abundance of resources that are available with students. Okay, so 10 years ago, when somebody would want to look at a concept they can't understand, they would go to the library and look at the book. 5 years ago, they would probably try to search for something, maybe try to reach out to maybe a fellow student, try to search for something on the internet, something they would find, something they would not, there would not be enough volume. That is not the case right now. Students have access to an abundance of alternate resources. But the problem is, which resource is the right one for a student? And right one doesn't mean that if the concept teaching matrix multiplication on there are 20 videos, doesn't mean one of them is wrong. They're correct, but you are the primary resource of like instruction resource for a student, right? You teach a student, he comes back and he wants to understand a very, very small, minute detail of what you taught him. So when a student refers to another resource by somebody else, the problem becomes that the teaching methods are different, or notations are different, or maybe the order of how that something is being taught is different. So students are not able to follow completely. So then who decides what is the right resource for a student? Because students can't decide that. Only learners, or rather teachers can, learners can't decide. So that becomes another problem. So even though you have an abundance of resources, students can't really decide what to use. And that's why you see when like a lot of these edtech companies became very popular and started selling upskilling courses, as soon as the content that was available started becoming guided and people started collating courses where you have all of the information bundled together, students know this is what I need to access, then it started picking up. But you don't see that for, let's say, a calculus course. Like a lot of calculus courses have videos, but those courses don't get as much volume for students as other courses do. And I would probably say there are more people studying calculus than an upskilling course. So STEM always comes up with a different set of problems that students are actually facing. And primarily because of the restrictions that teachers have with time, and primarily with time, they're not able to find out a way to fix it. And why are we talking about this now? So we did talk about active learning, and this has been going on for a while, right? The same sort of method that we are teaching, this has persisted for a while. So why now? So the reason I'm discussing this right now is we've just gone through, like I would say now we're back to almost back to normal. Like we are back to normal, but it doesn't seem like it. Completely, at least. So we've seen the pandemic situation really highlighted the problem where you're not able to engage students. So as soon as you weren't physically present in front of a student weren't really paying attention. So this hadn't, like, what was keeping a student's attention was not the content, was basically a physical presence, and that becomes a huge problem. But even during that situation, we talked to a lot of instructors during that time, and we actually realized that those sort of situations also gave us, or at least guided us on the path of how to fix it. So I'll list down a few situations that instructors faced, and they tried to find out ways to fix it. Primarily to just say, how do I ensure students are attending? How do I ensure they're actually listening to me? They've not just opened the class or opened the Google Meet and they just left. So if these are the things that their instructors are trying to fix, they came up with very different ways. Again, only instructors can come up with these sort of ways. Like I can't come and tell instructors, how do you manage operational changes to your course so your engagement is higher. Like I'll never be able to. Instructors will always be in a much better place to realize what works for them, what doesn't work for them, and will vary from instructor to instructor as well. But primarily what we saw with trying to ensure that students are paying attention, are engaged, instructors would share content. So then students don't really need to worry about noting down the same thing that is happening on the board. So instructor would create notes and they would share the same content with students. So students know I can just listen to content. And then later down, I already have notes. So then I don't need to worry about two things. Then if instructors wanted to realize that, okay, have you attended and were you actually paying attention or not? Some instructors, instead of attendance, they started taking daily quizzes as just a replacement for attendance. So you get 2 questions based upon the lecture that was given today, answer them. And the very basic questions, right? If you've attended the lecture, you would be able to answer it. And if students are not able to answer them, that means they were not present at all. And sometimes you would see even doubt clearing sessions outside the classroom, where students again would try out things outside because they had notes, and because instructors were not really going to classes specifically, not going to institutions, they were not as much operational challenges. Definitely they were there at the start, but once that got sorted out, there wasn't as much operational things to do as you would have in a classroom. You got to worry about NAAC accreditation, and there's this event coming up and you got to organize this, and you got to worry about a lot of different things. Those sort of things sort of reduce when you're not in a university environment. So you had a little bit more time, and instructors could then spend time on students want to ask a doubt. Instructor will say, okay, this is the session. You can reach out to me at, let's say, 3:30 to 3:45. I'll send you a Google Meet. And that face-to-face time that instructors would got with their students also help students, definitely, but really help instructors to identify, okay, what was the problem what my students facing? I wasn't really able to know. Maybe the active students inside the class will tell me, but not everybody would. So that also became very, very helpful. Even for this, you see, this made it a lot easier for students, right? Content sharing, simple quizzes you take, and you get doubt clearing sessions. You don't need to take down notes. Still, you see over 90% of students were happier coming back to physical classrooms. So what this definitely did is, and which I was very, very surprised by, is this has broken the myth that students only care about grades. Students got very good grades during the pandemic because you were very restricted in what kind of assessment you could take. But still, they weren't really happy because right now, you can't really say students were focused on grades because they weren't getting learning in a physical classroom. They realized that the learning that they're actually getting is not optimal, and they were happy to get back, even though that would mean the assessment would change, and you would need to pay a lot more attention than you were doing, and you can't just sit around the house now. You'll have to come to universities. Even they were happier with that sort of situation as well. So I would say right now, myth was it's up to the students to fix it. That's not really, that's not completely true now, because students now are happy coming to classes. They want to learn, really. At least they're interested, that they've shown. So what can the instructors do to try and fix it? Definitely with the limited amount of time that they have. What is the first thing that you can look at is trying to, definitely time will remain the same. Instructors can't be expected to work outside their regular hours, although a lot of instructors do as well. But how do we how do we optimize the learning experience, right? Just try to get more effectiveness out of it with the same amount of time. So the first option, or the easiest option, would be try to incorporate some level of technology to help you with some sort of processes that can be automated. Now, time, again, we mentioned, becomes a very important constraint. So what you can do is try to incorporate a blended learning model. So blended, if some instructors haven't heard of it, is just a mix of physical and online. So definitely, pandemic taught us there is no replacement for physical. It is 100%, it is needed. But you did see that with online, both for instructors operationally understanding what the whole class's level of understanding is. And even for students, there were some things that they were very happy with. So try to, if you can try to incorporate both those sort of worlds or blend them together, you can get the best of both worlds basically. So what this will allow is for guided learning to take place, both inside and outside the classroom. So when I say physical plus online, and I'll run you through another workflow diagram later to understand how this works. But what is very important here is guided learning. As I mentioned earlier, if you're sharing content elsewhere or through online resources to students, now it is your content. It is not secondary resource. There are no notation issues. There's no structural issues. Students will not get confused because it's the same guided module that you have created. So that definitely helps. And instructors then leverage technology to decide what students are learning, how they are learning, and when they're learning also, not just inside the classroom, but outside the classroom. And again, you just have 50 hours in a semester inside the classroom. Outside the classroom, you have a lot of time. So how can you ensure that students are studying outside the classroom, keep them interested, and not just they are studying, but even try to evaluate if they're studying, how much they've understood or not. What this model gives, which is extremely important, is flexibility for student. Now, this normally, which hasn't been a very important factor till now, is trying to meet the students' needs specifically. Like students take admissions. Right now, the objective is already students take admissions, they come to class and you study. This is the way that you are being taught. You should study properly. But the scenario that the students live in, the age has completely changed. Students have flexibility everywhere. They want to watch a movie, they have 10,000 options if they want to watch at any point of time. They want to watch it over 5 separate intervals, they can do it if they want. They want to order food, they can order from wherever and it can get delivered into their house in 15 minutes. So if they have this sort of options for everything that they want to do, want to buy clothes, want to hang out with friends, whatever they want to do, they have flexibility everywhere, both in terms of options, but also in terms of when they actually want to do something. That flexibility does not exist in education currently. Students don't have flexibility. They need to pay, and that's how the learning model currently is. They need to pay full attention in class. That's not really a bad thing. Like, that's good. But is it really fair for us to ask every student in a class to be 100% attentive in every lecture in a semester? Like, that won't happen. It can't really happen. Definitely not for all students, because all students will have different learning progresses. So what this will give you, like when you incorporate physical and online learning models, is students get a little bit more flexibility to, okay, I did not understand it completely inside the class because I wasn't able to pay as much attention. Now I have the option to spending more than I would have online. So instead of spending 15 minutes on going through the notes, I can now spend 25 because I have the notes available to me. I can access it whenever I want. So this flexibility the student has, because now students have demonstrated that they want to learn. So if you give them an opportunity to take responsibility for their learning, they will definitely do it. So just to give you a sample of how one possible model of blended learning could work. So you have a traditional classroom when you would teach. And again, I personally, I don't think traditional classroom is where a lot of invention is currently needed. Like, if you ask all students, students are in most cases attentive inside classroom. They have understood. There's very little that you would want to change in a traditional classroom environment. The problem is when a student gets out of the classroom environment, what happens then? Because instructor can't really control that. So what a blended learning model would do, you would teach students inside a class. Student goes back, accesses a learning module, a guided learning module that you created. Could be a video, could be notes, could be assessment, whatever it is, that, but it decides, the teacher is the one who decides what a student accesses. So student goes back, studies the learning module, then instructor accesses the same thing. Okay, this student didn't do completely, or my class only understood 80% of this question. This part of this sub part of the question, everybody got wrong. Immediately the teacher goes and okay, now first thing before the next lecture, I'll explain it to you guys. Or if you saw this one student realized I tried out some practice assignments, oh, I didn't do well, or I got only 30%. Now he knows where the challenges are, because he would not be able to know elsewhere because unit tests are like 3 months away. So if you have this sort of continuity with learning, if you can incorporate that, which blended with technology can allow you to do, you'll definitely improve your learning outcomes. So next 7-8 minutes, I'll just show you a very brief intro to the product and explain you how you can incorporate these active learning strategies using Mobius. And again, I'll be focusing on what will happen outside the classroom. As I mentioned, inside the classroom, I don't think we should be changing much. It's what is lost outside the classroom that becomes the problem. Student is gaining the same thing inside the classroom, but a lot is lost when he gets back to the next lecture. And we're just trying to ensure that we can retain that. So let's move on to another page. And we look at similar sort of concept. You have content, asking a student to go through it, but okay, not just content, ask him to answer questions somewhere in the middle, enter molar masses for all of this. Now answer a question based upon a numerical, based upon the formula that was just explained to you. You got it wrong, I'll tell you what the solution is also. But now if I've told the solution, I don't want the student to enter the same thing again. Don't worry, don't enter the same thing again. Try out another question. Try out as many as you want to, because the values will keep on changing. Not just numeric values, we're also able to change salts. Let's say magnesium sulfate. So I can pick off any of these 6 salts also, and the questions will, not just a question, the solution, but even the feedback will change. So this instant feedback that a student gets makes a lot of difference in trying to just improve engagement. And then you can even have videos, other things that you would want to incorporate, and even ask students to go through on a step-by-step basis for a longer question. Let's take a look at another example. So you can also incorporate applications into your learning module. And again, I'll show you a few sample content here. I am not really focusing on subjects or topics specifically, just giving you an idea what you can do with the product. If you have any other questions regarding how you can utilize Mobius for specifically your topic that you're actually teaching, your subjects, we can have a later discussion. You can reach out to us. Instead of just sharing the expansion for Taylor series, the formula, get an application. The student switches around, okay, I change the order of expansion, I change the expansion point, I can now visualize what's happening. I can change how the error is changing. Now let's keep the expansion point to 0. The error is pretty high, right? I keep on increasing and the error keeps decreasing. And I can see it becomes a much better approximation. So student is not just able to, you're not just telling him, he's able to validate it, he's able to visualize it. And if you want to ensure that everybody goes through it, because you would notice some students go through it, some don't. Or rather, I would say some students go through it, a lot of them don't. Then add questions on the same thing. When x equal to 0 and expansion point is pi by 2, order 1, what happens? You get values here. Ask him to enter the values. And all of this you'll track. Because all of this will be tracked, you will know what students went through it and what students didn't. So this not only helps students with feedback, but this feedback can also help you to understand how much they've understood and what they actually went through or not. And then you can allow to place restrictions. You didn't go through this, you won't be able to access the next lesson. And we specifically mentioned STEM, right? So this one thing that STEM needs is a lot of different question types. And we have a lot of specific flexible question type that you can use for a lot of different things. You can ask a student to enter a free body diagram. So you can draw forces, choose a force, let's say, let's go with tension. This could be gravity, and this can be automatically graded right now. And this is correct. Again, you can use free body diagrams for electronics courses as well. But this makes a lot of difference, right? If you had a free body diagram that need to be manually graded, now it's being automatically graded, and you can see a lot of time it can actually save when you put this in assessments or even in just standard lessons. And it's not just saving you time. Now, this is a lot better for a student to draw a free body diagram on a paper than upload. So this simply just increases his engagement as well, because this is the sort of thing he's actually doing on his or her phone throughout the day. So there's a lot of gamification involved, there's a lot of visualization involved. You can't really ask students to go back to pen and paper each time. Sure, that's important. That is very important skill, but can't be for throughout the course. At some point, there needs to be a middle ground where they are doing something online that they can access on their phones, they can access when they're traveling. They shouldn't rather always need to have a textbook and a register to basically note down or solve something. That should not happen always. Then we have another question type that allows you to pick something out of an image. So identify where's the armature. You select, click on how did I do? Okay, incorrect. Identify at which loop this equation would actually meet. Makes sense. Identify as in a code. So I'm just using an image because this is very flexible. You can use it for a lot of different things, even for stats. Identify what point is the solution for it. So not only are you able to grade questions, you're now able to test out very different things that you're not able to do by just MCQs or numerics. You're able to test out a lot of different things that even help with students understanding where the learning gaps are. Because in an exam, you have a 10-mark question. Student gets something wrong, then he gets the whole question is wrong. What you want to be able to do is let the student identify out of the 5 things that I need to do for a 10-mark question, where it is that I need to improve. And even something like sorting. So this again is not asking a student to solve a problem. This is asking a student to understand, or asking a student if he knows how to solve this. Is the structure clear to him or not? I'm not checking calculations. Is the structure clear to him? If you have lab classes that you take, could be any sort of lab classes, structurally, if they're able to identify let's say the structure of the pseudocode in that case, if they're able to identify steps for a particular procedure, could be a coding procedure, could be steps for a chemistry experiment. So if those sort of things are clear to him, you're able to test them out. Even a student is able to test them out, then it will definitely allow for a student to get better results out of the course. And finally, I did talk and try to introduce gamification. This is a type of assignment that you can actually create in the product that has a little bit of gamification feel to it. What this would actually mean is you can branch out the questions into different difficulty levels. So I'll start the assignment. Okay, which of the following limits takes indeterminate form? Student tries out, okay, maybe these two, right? So I'm starting from a medium level of question right now. I click on next. Okay, this was incorrect. So student gets dropped down to the lowest difficulty level. Now it tries out the solution. X value 1. Let me check if this is correct. Yeah, sure. -5/7. Correct. Okay, gets back up to the previous question. Now the value for this would be -6, infinite. I can enter sets also, intervals also if I wanted to. Next. Oh, I got incorrect. I'm again moved back to a lower level of question. At limit x equal to 1 does not exist, because left hand limit different right hand limit. You give them the ability to handle hints if you want to, but this sort of thing that a student is actually now doing is again important for a student to understand, because I have understood I can answer easy questions. I can't really answer medium questions yet. So then I work on those. Means the concepts are clear. I need to practice more. And this would be just, or I can switch the entry mode. That's also something that Mobis is able to attest to, right? You can have a math engine. You can do a lot more with questions. You can ask math properly. You can enter something like this, or student can enter something like this. Won't really make a difference because it's math. It will grade it exactly like a teacher would. And it tells me I'm correct. But I was asked 2 questions out of branch 1, both were correct, right? So easy questions I got correct, medium I couldn't really, and I wasn't able to get to the hard ones. That means I need to really work on my application. So what exactly that a student sees is what you will see as well. So you can then specifically tailor things now. You see this for a student, you can allow him to practice more. You can give him more assignments, or you can give him access to access to another assignment. If you see somebody who's not able to answer basic concepts, so then you allow him or ask him to go over the lesson again, or maybe ask him to go over a couple more videos that are explaining things in a bit more detail that maybe wasn't needed for the whole class, but it is needed for him. So with this, you're able to get a very good understanding of, sure, for the whole class, but even an understanding of what individual students are doing. So you can actually then cater the learning processes that will suit them. And the reason you're able to do all of this is you're not utilizing the class time here. Students have to study when they go back home. But right now, you're not in charge. They study however they want. So if you're able to utilize a platform that guides, uses the same sort of content that you would want to use, I was able to test students whenever you want to. And these are not high-stake exams, so there's no stress involved with testing, right? This is just a simple question, practice question. You try it out, don't try it out. Maybe you don't even want to incorporate these marks in their internal assessments. So if that is something, that means there's no pressure involved with assessment. This is just a process of learning. This can definitely help with not just having engagement, but now allowing instructors just having more time to teach. Because now you're not just limited to having time inside the classroom. You can now even share the very basic concept. Let's say you want to teach a concept, but the 20% is very simple. You can have them study it. Okay, this is the content, study it, and I'll teach it tomorrow. So you're now able to leverage time outside the classroom. You can do it through technology. And the reason for that is not only you're able to provide better quality content, but you're also able to understand what students are actually seeing. So that is a few ways where you can actually incorporate active learning strategies into your courses. I guess we have a couple of questions. And we will, I'll just take a few, right? Sure. So I have one question here specifically to Dr. Rakesh. So you wanted to mention new age of education and how are we actually addressing it? So broadly, what we are trying to incorporate is the education system, like technology is incorporated or integrated into a lot of systems. Like everything has changed, not necessarily for education, or definitely the changes have been made, have not been the same as that's been made elsewhere. So what we are trying to do is just incorporate technology into a system. And again, I'm not giving you course content. We're not trying to say you take course content from somewhere, or you take a platform that allows you to build, like, share content. That's not the only thing. We leverage technology, whatever technology you find useful, to make sure that the effectiveness of the course is now higher. Because with the improvements in technology, you're able to do things that you weren't able to do earlier. Now you're able to assess whether students have understood something or not outside the classroom. You're able to take much better assessments that you were able to 10 years ago. You're able to now understand how much the student understood. You're able to share much better quality content with applications and videos and etc. that you would want to share with students that you weren't able to do earlier. So we're just giving you, and specifically the primary instructor of the course, the ability to do that with their students. So because that is the world that the students are living in. And you will see now, maybe 5-6 years down the line, all of the teachers, like teachers who are teaching now, they'll keep getting students who studied using a lot of these at K-12 EdTech apps that are available. They studied on their tablets, they studied on their phones. Definitely the secondary level of education. When they went back home after school, they studied on their phones. But what happens when they come back to class or to colleges? What will happen then? Like, do we really expect them to go back? Okay, go and take your notes, write down a piece of paper, and then go ahead and revise it again and try out another few questions on a piece of paper. That will be a way too big a gap for them to bridge. So that is what we're trying to help you guys with. And already school to colleges right now is a very big gap. So we're just trying to help you out there. And I think Neeraj has definitely put some sample lessons for the product to you guys. And you have had our information available to you. We'll be sharing a webinar recording along. So you can access it or share it with other people if you wanted to. So if I don't see any other questions right now, but if you want to feel like you want to get in touch with us regarding the webinar or even regarding whatever it is that we offer, do definitely you can reach out to us on the same communication channel that we shared you the webinar information through. And I would thank everyone for attending and being very patient. I think we ran a little longer than we intended to. So thanks everybody for attending. I guess that's it from my end. And if we don't have any questions, then I guess we can end the webinar here.